Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to this AdAge custom webcast sponsored by GumGum. The topic of today's webcast, a picture is worth 1 billion engagements, capturing consumer attention in line with images and content. I'm Bob Norp, your moderator for today. Now, before we begin, we have just a few quick items to go over. We will hear from today's presenters, and then we'll open the floor to your questions. To participate in the Q&A portion of the webcast, all you have to do is type your question into the Ask a Question text area below the presentation window, and then click the Submit button. You may submit the questions at any time during the webcast. We will address as many questions as time permits after our presenters' prepared remarks. Please also note the series of widgets that are available for you toward the bottom of the console. Now let's get started with today's webcast. As I mentioned, our presenters for today are Josh Jacobs of Accuen and Ophir Tanz of GumGum. Now, Josh Jacobs is Global CEO of Accuen and the President of Omnicom Media Group. He is responsible for driving the platform strategy and media partnerships for OMG's digital media investments and leading the global Accuen team, which delivers programmatic media solutions to OMG clients in over 60 countries. Ophir Tanz is CEO and founder of GumGum, the largest in-image advertising platform. His background in the tech space is extensive, having founded and sold 2 previous companies. So now we can get started, and I'm going to turn it over to Josh. Take it away.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. As Bob mentioned, Accuen works with some of the largest brands and publishers in the world, and I wanted to start today by sharing with you 3 key pillars that we think can guide your digital marketing efforts in the coming year. The first is being viewable isn't the same as being memorable. And when we look at the press today, what we find is that we're drowning in a sea of news and hype about making sure that ads are viewable. But viewability is just the tip of the iceberg. When marketers ask the question, are users seeing my ads? The question they're really asking is digital really effective? Does it help my message connect with consumers? Questioning whether advertising works has been a pastime of marketers for over a century. When John Wanamaker famously said, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted, the trouble is I don't know which half. But even if we perfect delivery to improve viewability to 100%, marketers still face the issue of banner blindness. Thankfully, this is a problem that we can start to tackle together. With online display ads, creativity and targeting also count. Eye tracking studies measuring how long users look at particular ad creatives on pages show us things like the quality of message and execution really matters. Users are 4 times more likely to spend time looking at a top-performing creative unit versus one of the worst-performing creative units. And relevance matters as well. In one eye tracking study, men were shown either an ad for a male body soap or a female body soap. All the male respondents spent 2 seconds or more looking at the male soap ad and noticed it after only 3 seconds on screen. The other ad was automatically filtered out by respondents, and only half of them even saw the creative unit, despite its identical size and placement on an identical website. The users who did see the unit took 5 seconds longer to fixate on it and spent half the time looking at it. Fortunately, programmatic buying allows you to precisely target audiences in the contexts that are relevant to them, leaving marketers to worry about testing and refining creative messaging instead of worrying whether people will see your ad at all. The second pillar that we wanted to talk about today is around programmatic buying. And for those of you who have been following this space, programmatic buying has been a buzzword in the industry now for the past few years. And what we're seeing now is that it's really coming into its own, and that this is the year that we think programmatic is truly ready for prime time. The numbers that we're seeing show that programmatic is projected to make up literally 1/3 of all digital spend by the year 2018. And the key driver behind this is the ability to apply data to media, and the next round of innovation is expanding that across numerous other channels beyond just the web and mobile. If you think about this, what we're really saying is that over the past few years, we've been testing out programmatic, and we think of it almost as the real-time bidding or the exchange-bought media was a pilot phase where we figured out the technology, we got the plumbing in place, we connected publishers and buyers. But as programmatic has evolved out of that pilot phase, future growth is going to come from different screens and different devices. We're now ready to start using data and technology to add real value to branding budgets. Not only has technology evolved, but both brands and publishers are more comfortable with living in a programmatic world. And this opens the door to deeper integrations with publishers for better access to data, inventory, and opportunities for creative flexibility. The third pillar, and one that shouldn't surprise anybody, is that mobile really matters. Publishers that we work with at Omnicom are telling us that upwards of 50% of their traffic at this point is coming from tablets and phones. The consumer has already moved to mobile. And they're spending more and more of their time across multiple fragmented platforms throughout the day. More than half of them use platforms throughout the day that move between tablet and phone. And while they're at it, they're more receptive than ever to promotions and messages delivered via a mobile device, with over 50% of consumers rating mobile messages as useful. But the current standard banner formats for mobile are tiny and are often not well integrated with other content. And programmatic can help you to elevate mobile marketing by targeting natively integrated placements that don't interfere with the user's experience or are more smartly integrated into the user experience. Today, this is actually easier to do with mobile ads than it is on the desktop. Another area is using geodata to make your ads location aware. Mobile adds another dimension of geolocation to the targeting mix, giving marketers the opportunity to find consumers in the times and places where they're most primed to receive messages. And finally, this gives us an opportunity to reach consumers as they find our brands across different platforms. Because so many consumers are switching devices throughout the day, reaching users at scale across platforms becomes more and more difficult, but also more and more important. Building data and activation platforms that can locate and serve messages to users across all of their devices, especially mobile, is the next digital marketing challenge. So we're excited about GumGum because we see them solving a lot of these problems that we've talked about and creating some of these great new opportunities to engage consumers. And with that, I'd love to turn it over to Ophir, who can tell you more about that.
Thanks so much, Josh. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Ophir Tanz. I am the CEO and founder of GumGum, as was mentioned earlier. And we did invent the field of in-image advertising. We've seen tremendous industry uptake. And I think, as sort of Josh points out, it's because in-image advertising really does solve many of the pain points that traditional sort of display doesn't quite cover. So today I'd like to share some of our thoughts about the power of images and show you how our clients are using in-image advertising to capture attention, drive higher engagement, and beyond. So today we're going to focus some of the discussion on imagery in the visual web. We know that imagery has sort of always been fundamental, but we've really seen images as storytelling devices thrive over the past few years. So to take a deeper look at that, there's trillions and trillions of images online, about 5 trillion as the most recent estimate. According to Mary Meeker, who puts out the trends report for Kleiner Perkins, and she just put one out a couple weeks ago, nearly 2 billion photos are posted and shared on the Internet every single day. We know that Facebook sees about 350 million photo uploads a day, Instagram about 60 million. The list goes on and on. And from an investment perspective, we see companies like Pinterest seeing valuations of $4 billion, and Instagram and Tumblr reaching $1 billion, and there's really been heavy investment in this category. And I think the reason is because images engage consumers in a very powerful and unique way. Images drive more page views than any other piece of content on the Internet. They're typically the best real estate on a given web page. They're a very powerful sort of canvas for delivering a marketing message. They're emotional and they're visceral. So if we look at this next slide, we run a lot of eye tracking studies here at GumGum, and they typically look something like this. Users focus their energy and their attention on the body of the page where the content is. That's why they visited a given web page, to consume that content. And images, by and large, get the most heat, the most attention, the most focus if you're actually looking at where users are sort of training their eyes. So before we continue, I'd like to show you just a couple live examples of what in-image ads look like, because I think once you see it visually, if you're not currently familiar, it'll really help sort of hammer the point home. So I want to start the screen share now. You guys should see one of our publishers here, the New York Daily News. And if I go ahead and refresh this page, what you'll see here is an ad load up on top of that image about the Katy Perry Part of Me movie. And what's happening here is Paramount came to GumGum and they said, hey, we'd like to promote the Katy Perry movie, and we'd like to do so by targeting all images of Katy Perry across your platform. The whole idea here is that we're able to capture the user at the moment at which they're most actively engaged with this concept, and do so in a very visible way. If you actually click on the ad unit, then you'll see a video light box appear, and the user could engage with that in various ways. And to show you just another example of one of our very impactful units, this is called a Canvas unit. Here's an example of Bud Light targeting NFL content, takes over the entirety of the image for up to 5 seconds, collapses down into an in-image ad. Very, very difficult to ignore. And to Josh's point earlier, being viewable is not the same as being memorable, and it's certainly not the same as being seen. So if we jump back into the presentation now, just to give you a sense of our scale, we reach about 340 million monthly uniques across many of the largest properties in the world. You can see some of those names here, publishers like Shape.com, Hearst, U.S. News & World Report. The list goes on, really covering most major categories. Work with a lot of endemic automotive publishers and culinary sites, and the list goes on and on. Another great opportunity that GumGum offers is the ability to really capture events in very powerful ways at scale. Here you can see BP actually targeting the Olympics and getting great exposure and association with that event, of which they are a sponsor. Here's another example of Dove targeting Oscars content. So if it's the Oscars, the World Cup, the Emmys, the Grammys, the Country Music Awards, whatever the event may be, these events are by and large captured via imagery, and we're able to deliver those experiences in very powerful ways to marketers. Another great example is sort of automotive, one of our largest categories, and we are able to look at imagery and understand images at the make and model level if there's a vehicle in the image. So if you want to target every image of a Chrysler 300 or a BMW 3 Series, then you're able to sort of, do a retention buy or a conquesting buy in very targeted, very powerful ways. And lastly, you guys might have seen a recent article that we actually ran in AdAge. This just came out last week in partnership with L'Oreal. And in this case, we're actually targeting the creative based on the hair color in the image. So depending on the hair color that appears in a given image, we're able to show the relevant product. And this is just, these are just a few examples of the kind of work that we're able to do. But, fundamentally what GumGum does is we look at billions of images every single month, and we programmatically determine what those images are about at the keyword level, and we offer those targeting opportunities to marketers at scale. If you look at the performance metrics that we see, it's pretty compelling stuff. So on average across all of our units, we see a 0.84% CTR, obviously dramatically higher than the 0.06 or 0.08 or 0.1% we see with traditional banner ads. Time in view also very high, about 19 seconds on average. And the engagement rate, which is actually a metric that we track with ComScore, it actually measures how long the mouse pointer is within the frame set of an ad. It's an indicator of where people are focusing their attention is 9.1% on average. The industry average is 2.2%. If you look at our Canvas units, which we talked about earlier with the Bud Light example, we actually see an average of 22%, so literally 10 times the engagement that you see elsewhere. From a brand lift perspective, here's a study that we ran with Nielsen. It's available both on their website and ours, with Toshiba marketing their new LED TVs, targeting NFL content and a variety of other subjects, purchase intent lift of 32%. And next you'll see a brand lift study that we also ran with Nielsen. This is actually available in the IAB in-image advertising primer, so we do chair the board over at the IAB for in-image advertising. We did co-author this paper in partnership with the IAB, and we see here a lift in awareness that's over 3 times industry average. So I encourage you guys to go to iab.net/inimage to download that white paper if you'd like to learn more. Next is viewability. Viewability is something that we really excel at, and the reason is we don't actually load up any in-image ads unless images come into full view of the browser. So the viewability rates are inherently very high. We've been doing this since day one, since before viewability was a really hot topic, and we do at this point track viewability across all of the campaigns that we run. We see an average rate of 81%. In this next slide here, you can see, it looks like the numbers are missing, but how that compares to the benchmarks according to Double Verify, similar if you're looking at the ComScore benchmarks, but significantly higher than what we're able to produce with traditional banner ads for a variety of reasons. Now, 100% viewability is not possible, but we do think we're approaching the limits of what is possible, and always working to get those numbers even higher. I just want to reiterate what Josh said earlier, in that viewability is not the same as being seen. At the end of the day, there's really dismal viewability rates across traditional banner advertising, and the bigger issue is that when those ads are viewable, there's a really there's a big chance that those ads are not getting seen, because we've gotten very good at sort of ignoring banner ads, as we know. So our fundamental belief is placing ads in line with the content that users are actively engaging with is really the more appropriate way to market, and the way of the future, because to Josh's point about mobile, obviously a lot of time spent in content consumption is occurring on those devices. Those devices are much smaller. We don't have a lot of excess real estate to devote to banner advertising. It does make a lot of sense to place marketing messages in line with the content, in stream with content that users are actively engaging with. In-image works really well as a mobile solution. I encourage you guys to check that out at our website on your mobile devices. And beyond that, the ability to pair audience data from a programmatic perspective to the contextual data that we already understand about images is an incredibly powerful way to really pinpoint the users that are the lowest hanging fruit, that are the most likely to convert, and target them at the appropriate moment in time. So in closing, really everyone wins. Consumers get a polite advertising unit. They get real estate back from publishers. They have the ability to close out these units entirely. Publishers receive an entirely new revenue stream. So image inventory historically has not been monetized. It's the last remaining piece of content to be monetized. We've sort of unlocked that opportunity for publishers, and it's a meaningful contributor for many of the largest publishers in the world today. And for marketers, of course, a really opportune, very powerful opportunity to capture users at the moment at which they're most actively engaged. So thank you all for listening to that portion, and I believe that we now have a Q&A section.
That's right. That's right. We're ready now to open the floor for your questions. As a reminder, to participate in our Q&A, just type your question into the Ask a Question text area, then click the Submit button. If we don't get to your question, we'll do our best to get back to you later. First up, I've got a question here for Josh. Can programmatic buying be used to achieve brand objectives? I know that's on a lot of people's minds because it seems like it's all computerized and, kind of taking away the human element. But can it give you the opportunity to really deliver on a brand objective?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Hopefully you guys can hear me better now. I apologize if it was softer earlier. We're seeing fantastic opportunities in using programmatic for branding, and it comes from a couple of different areas. Ophir talked earlier about marketing around events like the World Cup, and as you can imagine, with some of the largest advertisers in the world, events like that become critical parts of our clients' branding, sponsoring both the television programming around that as well as making significant investments around digital properties where fans are going to check scores and see highlights and things like that. And even at a most basic level, if you think about an advertiser that has multiple products, for example, the ability to deliver a more targeted message, even within the context of that overall sponsorship, is incredibly valuable because it allows us to speak in a much more one-on-one fashion with the individual consumer and offer them messages that are more likely to drive a response from them. Another area in which we see programmatic being incredibly effective for branding is that it allows us to look at the overall exposure and engagement of individual users that are seeing a branding campaign. And when you look at the data that comes from delivery of campaigns on individual publishers, we tend to see that the visitors to a typical publisher's website, a handful of them represent a huge amount of the traffic, and a lot of people just come and sample. They see one page and they move on. And from a branding perspective, that's very ineffective because it doesn't allow us to repeat messages with the right level of frequency to get a message to really sink in. And so we're using programmatic today to monitor the delivery of a campaign in real time and do things like supplement additional frequency against users that we're not finding in the initial branding campaign and use supplemental messaging to ensure that we're achieving our branding objective and not just delivering impressions.
And that's really important. And one of the problems with programmatic, or one of the perceived problems, is that it's remnant inventory, but that's not really the case, right? I mean, you're getting premium inventory a lot of times, and it can deliver on a brand objective if you're targeting at that level.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a terminology thing here, which is that real-time bidding or exchange buying has traditionally started out anyway as largely being about remnant or unsold inventory. And I like to think of that almost as a lab environment where, starting out with direct response advertising that cared less about context and more about just reaching the right person at the right time, we were able to build out a tremendous industry and technology infrastructure, including all the work that's been done with publishers to enable their inventory, all the innovation that's happening around buying technology, all the innovation around measurement. But now we're starting to apply that same methodology and that same data-driven decisioning process to all the media that we buy. And that doesn't mean that you don't work directly with a publisher and that you don't, say, buy 100% of the inventory on the World Cup microsite that Yahoo is going to build for the World Cup. It's great. But you can still then bring data and real-time decisioning into how you deliver that block of media that you bought. And that's really the next wave here. When we talk about that circle of all of these different media channels that are becoming programmatic, it's not that everything is becoming remnant. It's that premium media is becoming what we like to refer to as decisionable, or can be made to be more effective by using the data that we're getting in real time to adjust the messages that we're delivering.
That's a great way to put it. Ophir, taking it to the next level, I mean, obviously your technology is really interesting. It's basically delivering on what Josh is talking about in a very actionable unit that is exciting for the consumer. So how does your technology know the meaning of images, and what targeting options are available for in-image advertising?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we understand imagery by sort of leveraging a variety of methodologies. So my background is computer science, and I have a background in computer vision, and I believe we've assembled one of the best sort of image science teams in the country. So we're able to, without any sort of human involvement, look at an image, understand things like eye color, hair color, facial detection, facial recognition, gender recognition, if there's a logo in the image, which brand is being represented there, if there's a vehicle in the image, what's the make and model of that vehicle. The list goes on and on and on and on. And we also pair that with semantic understanding of the web page and the photo. So we look at things like metadata, captions, the actual article text surrounding an image, and sort of marry those two methodologies to really triangulate around what an image is all about.
You know, there's one question that's out there about the technology. I want to drill down a little bit more on that. Sure. Does GumGum technology require publisher support to analyze on-site imagery and then cross-reference that against the CG image database?
No, it's a great question. I think the beauty of GumGum is its simplicity from a publisher and marketer perspective. So from the publisher's perspective, we do have direct and exclusive relationships with all the publishers that we've talked about, and they put our code on their property, on every page of the property. But there's literally no change to their existing workflow. There's no indication provided by publishers around what imagery is about. So there's no change to how they're sort of publishing content on a day-to-day basis. They just pop the code on. We determine what all the imagery is about, get that inventory sort of sold and spoken for, and begin monetizing for them.
Now, are GumGum in-image formats and inventory available programmatically?
They are not currently available programmatically, but we are aggressively building those pipes and expect them to be available in the very near term. So expect some announcements around that.
All right, that sounds good. Now, is there a difference in click-through rate if the ads are purely branding ads versus event special campaign ads? Either of you can take this one. Josh, you want to try to answer this first?
Sure. I mean, I think the engagement metrics that we look at, whether it be clicks or other kinds of engagement, varies hugely by creative, but also by targeting. And what we see wide ranges of responses based on our ability to target people with a call to action that is actually aligned with their current state of intent. And when you do a good job with that, which is one of the huge benefits of programmatic, you tend to see higher click-through rates and higher conversions on different kinds of transactions. With branding, though, what we're seeing is much richer formats where it's not just a CTR that's the most important metric that you're looking at, but interaction with the ad units themselves, which when you look at research on things like brand lift and awareness are much more compelling than just clicking through to microsites. So I don't think it's simply a question of what is the objective of the campaign so much as the old sort of adage of, are you putting the right message in front of the right person at the right time? And are you doing so with either a call to action or an opportunity directly in the ad unit to get the consumer's attention and get them to engage with you?
And that leads to a follow-up question. I mean, how effective are pictures versus a PPC text ad in terms of branding versus leads?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think that with a PPC sort of text ad, there's absolutely, obviously, a massive place in the world for that. We've seen Google's revenue numbers, and they sort of speak for themselves. And of course, if somebody is telling you what they're interested in at a given moment in time, and you're able to deliver that experience for them, there's a huge opportunity there, and that's, of course, search. But there is this other bucket, which is actually the larger bucket, which is branding and storytelling and actually connecting to users on sort of an emotional level and communicating, beyond just a sort of point of sale or point of purchase opportunity, communicating what a brand is all about. And I would argue that imagery and even other mediums beyond imagery are really much more powerful mediums for accomplishing that end. So I think, there's absolutely a place for both types of opportunities in the world. It's just a function of what you're ultimately after as a marketer.
Would you say the same thing, Josh? Do you have the same opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I think what PPC ads have really shown to be very, very effective at is what we sort of think of as capturing intent in session. And so when you have somebody who is actively engaged in looking for a product or looking for information, to be able to offer them something right there in the search results, for example, that allows them to further that activity is very effective. From a branding perspective, though, where what we're trying to drive are things like brand favorability and consideration or awareness of a product. I'm with Ophir on this. I think the richer and more interactive, more visual you can be with that, the better. And, if you think about, I'll use State Farm, one of our clients, as an example, and all this stuff that they do with Chris Paul, the NBA player, they're trying to build an association between their brand and the NBA, and they've got an iconic basketball player as a spokesperson for them. Being able to use that image and build on that association, whether you're seeing it in television or whether you're seeing it in a digital environment, is a hugely critical part of their overall branding strategy and something that's very, very hard, if not impossible, to accomplish in a text-only environment. So, I would just second what Ophir said. There's room for both. They have roles to play, and it's much more about what are you trying to accomplish than any specific type of ad.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think to sort of further the point and to sort of further communicate the things that Josh and I are working on in our own respective ways is, at the end of the day, it's very difficult to run a powerful branding campaign via text creative, but it's also very difficult on some level to do so via traditional display where you're confined to a 300 by 250 or a rectangle. It's really a limited medium to sort of do that sort of storytelling that's so vitally important. So I think that, what Josh and I have are sort of after is, from Josh's perspective, how do you programmatically at very large scale, tell a brand story in a powerful way? And with an image, it's very similar in that today, if you want to sort of have a very custom execution and sort of produce something very beautiful and engaging, you can do so directly with publishers in many cases, but those tend to be a very limited scale. And what an image is trying to do is take that same sort of concept, but really enable marketers to scale it at very, very, very large scale. And at the end of the day, scale is what matters because it takes a lot of time and energy to produce this content. There's a lot of back and forth in getting it live. And at the end of the day, if you're not reaching a critical mass, then that whole effort is sort of lost.
Well, speaking of visual advertising and the importance of it, one of the big questions people are dealing with right now is video. And what opportunities, Ophir, do you see with video, especially with the GumGum technology? Is there plans in the works for using it?
So video is a good question. We do actually a huge amount of video distribution today, so that's a click to Lightbox. Our video completion rates are incredibly high, and that's because there's intent there. When somebody clicks on one of our ad units, it's because they actually want to engage with what they're going to see. And we power video distribution for a lot of entities out there and obviously do so directly with a lot of marketers as well. We're not immediately looking to apply our technology to the video category, I think that video is a pretty saturated space, and there's a lot of capable companies in that space doing interesting things. From my perspective, imagery is sort of the bastard child here that everyone's sort of forgotten about, but it's what everyone spends the most time with. So again, video is being monetized in various ways. Text is monetized in various ways. But images, the thing that we spend the most amount of time with, we devote the most amount of attention to, and where there's massive amount of scale, has really been left out in the cold. And the reason for that is because the images represent a very difficult technical challenge. And that technical challenge is understanding what they're about. If you don't understand what they're about, you can't do anything interesting with them. So, we really view our mission as unlocking the power of images, initially and currently via in-image advertising, but we intend to do so in increasingly sort of powerful and interesting ways.
That's really interesting stuff. I wanted to throw this next question at Josh and change gears here for a little bit, because when you think about programmatic solutions are about usually huge buys and having to get out a lot of messages to a lot of different opportunities out there, and it makes it more efficient. But is programmatic advertising as effective and efficient for niche products and niche brands as it is for the mainstream branding and product markets?
Well, emphatically, yes. It's a great question, and the way that I see this is that programmatic is ultimately about making a dollar work harder. And if you have a niche brand or a niche product, it's more important than ever with a smaller budget that you know that budget is working as hard as it possibly can. There's some really great research that's been done around consumer behavior that shows that, typically when people are in the market for something, they have room in their brains for about 2 products. And that effectively, if you're not in the top 2 brands of consideration, it's much, much harder to get involved in that sale process. So for smaller brands, what programmatic really offers is an ability to get a much deeper understanding of who are the people that are most likely to be responsive, and to push your budget as hard as it can to focus just on those folks that you can move into top 2 from a consideration perspective. And for challenger brands that are being outspent in the market, for example, this is a way for you to make your dollars catch up to the larger budgets that they have at their disposal.
And that's a great answer, because obviously a lot of people are looking at programmatic and trying to explore all the opportunities. So to know that it's good for niche brands is important for all of us. Now, do you consider?
We actually, as really interesting example around this. We've done some fascinating work with larger brands that were trying to engage shareholders, and have been able to do things like build audience segments for them based just on the shareholders that they have in their company, which is a very, very, very small, fraction of the overall internet community. But then to push content to those groups in a very, very effective manner, which was a replacement strategy for essentially, buying ads on investing publishers and hoping that the people that they cared about were going to see them.
Fascinating stuff. Hey, I want to move over here back to Ophir for a second. Do you consider in-image advertising to be a native format, or how does it relate to native? Obviously, everybody's talking about native these days.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in-image, certainly sits within the frame set of content. It sits within the frame set of photos, and from that perspective, it's a very native unit. But depending on the execution, which oftentimes is sort of our own version of display advertising in various sort of rich media formats, I think that from that perspective it's more display. So I think it is a really nice marriage between native and display. We do have executions that are purely native, that purely sort of push additional sort of content out that is relevant to the content that user is engaging with at that moment in time. But our sort of larger business and the couple examples that I showed earlier, I think are really don't fit into one category. I think they're just a marriage between the 2.
And let me ask a question here about local market targeting, because obviously this is great for targeting national level and large scale companies, but is the GumGum format good for targeting local specific markets with smaller brands?
Absolutely. We do a lot of Tier 2, Tier 3, highly geo-targeted, highly localized campaigns. So I do think that similar to the reasons that Josh mentioned earlier is if you're going to go local, it's about really granularly and accurately targeting an audience. And I think that certainly programmatic obviously lends itself very well to that, and I believe an image does as well. At the end of the day, it needs to sort of be a meaningfully large enough sort of opportunity, but we work with a lot of brands that are very focused on certain regions of the country and certain customer segments, and they're not interested in reaching anybody beyond that, and I think that this is a very powerful tool to accomplish that.
Now, what about ad blockers? I mean, are ad blockers a danger here? Will they block an in-image advertisement, or does it beat the ad blocker?
So they're not presently really an issue for us. Could they, in theory, block an in-image ad as you do any other ad? Sure. We've seen some of that historically. It's really kind of a cat and mouse game between the ad companies and the ad blockers. So there's no real unique answer here to that. But, we do measure that, and there isn't a meaningful amount of it happening as far as we can tell.
Now, this question goes out for both of you, and I'd love to get your perspective on this. Looking forward a few years, what do you foresee is the future of images for marketers? Josh, do you want to take it first? I know Ophir probably has some really defined opinions about this, but I'll want to hear what you have first.
Yeah, I'm guessing Ophir doesn't think much of it, but from our perspective, I think there's a couple of things. One is that I think we share the belief with GumGum that images are an incredibly powerful way of storytelling. But I think the other thing that we're seeing with images, and especially with the prevalence of camera phones and various photo sharing services and the rest of it, is that they're also an incredible way for consumers to share passion and to communicate with each other. And from a marketing perspective, the ability to tap into ways in which people are sharing the important moments in their lives, communicating with their friends, indulging in things that they're excited about, et cetera, is an incredibly powerful, I think, emerging channel of media that is largely untapped. And when we think about things that lend themselves to imagery, like sporting events, like the Oscars and some of the other things that we've been talking about, these are incredibly passionate areas for consumers who want to see the stories that they're following brought to life in pictures. And as a marketer, you can't ask for anything more than that other than the opportunity to participate in that and bring those things to life. So I think it's a channel that we're going to see incredible growth in. I think it's an area that marketers should be aggressively looking at today, because I think of all the things that we've talked about today. This is a fantastic way to be spending time with consumers in a place that they love.
Yeah, I think it's a great answer. I don't know if you want me to share some quick thoughts around that.
I absolutely do. I was going to reframe the question, but you just go for it. Go for it.
Okay. So I agree with everything Josh said, certainly. I also think there's a few different ways to look at sort of the image landscape. Billion camera phones are going to be sold this year. We obviously have these social mediums that are fundamentally driven by imagery. We have things like Pinterest and Tumblr and Instagram. Even Twitter is making an aggressive push towards being a more visual platform, because ultimately it's easier to take a picture and write a fun comment and tell the story that way than it is to think of a clever 140-character sort of statement. So certainly within those ecosystems and those platforms, and we're already starting to see some of this stuff come to light, there's opportunity. Pinterest is sort of playing with sponsored pins, and Of course, Instagram is sort of playing with sort of native sponsored Instagram posts, and there's already meaningful sort of transactions happening around that, as Josh knows well. And fundamentally, from a publishing perspective, outside of the UGC arena, I read a study the other day that showed that articles with at least one image, doesn't have to be a large image or a fancy image, just at least one image in it, receive 100% more page views. We're at this point, sort of as a public, we like tidbits, we like to sort of consume information quickly, and imagery is really the best medium to do that. So, an image sort of is worth 1,000 words is really a powerful, relevant sort of statement here. And at the end of the day, as you mentioned before, images are fundamental. They're visceral. They're not going away. It doesn't matter if we're engaging via Google Glass or a mobile device or a tablet or a PC or whatever the future may hold. Our brains are attuned to imagery, and that's where we want to spend our energy and our attention. It's the job of marketers to go to where the users are spending energy and attention and time. So, from my perspective, whether or not GumGum continues to grow and thrive, we do feel that we have introduced at least a form of advertising and an approach to advertising that is a multi-billion-dollar, if not larger, industry that will continue to grow.
Now, we wouldn't be marketers in 2014 if there wasn't at least one one real-time marketing question here. And I want to ask, how quickly can GumGum respond with relevant content to an immediate event, something that's happening in real time?
Yeah, well, this is actually something that a variety of agencies have tapped into GumGum to do in an official capacity. So a variety of agencies, won't go into specifics, but do have sort of real-time groups sort of, scouring news and events and waiting for opportune moments to put out relevant information, to achieve sort of, paid, shared, earned media. And the Oreo cookie example, of course, at the Super Bowl is the one that everyone likes to refer to. So because when events occur, they typically occur in specific ways, and if you're going to capture that opportunity, you need to do so in sort of a powerful, visible way. We found that we are a good component of those strategies. So the idea here is, if something occurs with a given individual or a given event, we can sort of very quickly take over or associate with those images and deliver the message and the brand association, the opportunity to reshare sort of that media and that message in pretty powerful ways. And we're able to, with a variety of third-party tools that we have, deploy those, within hours, if not more quickly. So hopefully there's a question. Yep.
Are you also able to target audiences in addition to context with the tool, in terms of trying to be relevant to the audience and what's going on?
Absolutely. So layering on audience data on top of our contextual understanding of pages and imagery is something that we do on almost every campaign. So audience is a meaningful component to what we do, and as we sort of delve deeper into programmatic, that understanding of audiences only gets better.
And what do you do to ensure brand safety across the GumGum platform? Obviously, you don't want your product being displayed on the wrong image. How do you manage that?
Yeah, good question. So first of all, we don't work with any sort of unsafe content. In other words, it's not an open platform that's self-serve that serves the long tail. These are sort of well-known premium brand-safe publishers, but obviously we go beyond that. We run double verify and other third-party sort of ad verification brand safety tools across 100% of our campaigns. We do a huge amount of sort of keyword anti-targeting, things like nudity detections on photos, and a few other sort of things to sort of tend to that issue. And
can you tell a little bit more about whether or not you find a huge audience acceptance, or do you find a lot of audience resentment for cover-over banners or stuff like that? I mean, what's your general sense of the appreciation for these particular ads?
Yeah, so we typically measure that via sort of, how much hate mail are we or the publishers that we work with getting, and that and that number is virtually zero. I can tell you that when we started the company, we weren't running such beautiful branded ads, and it was earlier on, and we were experimenting with a few different methodologies. I can tell you that when you put something in front of a user or cover up content in an inelegant way, users definitely react to it, and they react to it, very vocally. So I think that that is, at the end of the day, a somewhat crude but strong sort of measure of sort of acceptance. And we do work with many of the largest brands in the world, largest publishers in the world. They are fundamentally, very, more than anything committed to their audiences and user sort of happiness and the user experience. So, we have a variety of tools exposed to publishers, and we are very selective in sort of how we show ads, when we show ads, the frequency at which they're shown, and we think we've struck that right balance.
Well, with the sirens in the background, I think it's time for us to wrap up for this evening. Anyway, we've reached the end of our time. Please remember to fill out the exit survey, which I'm going to push now out to the audience. We would love for you to give your opinions. Thank you for attending AdAge's custom webcast sponsored by GumGum. You can also view and listen to this presentation on demand using the same link you used to attend today. You will receive an email as soon as the archive is ready. On behalf of our guests, Josh Jacobs of Accuen and Ophir Tanz at GumGum, thank you for your time. Have a great day.